Hello friends, welcome to the world of Chhuti presents Escape into Audio Stories in English. We will read stories primarily of India, Pakistan, Bangladesh and Southeast Asian origin and in English language. We'll try to read in neutral accent as much as possible and with our best attempts. We will focus on literature for kids and children. Today we are going to read Letters from a Father to His Daughter by Jawaharlal Nehru. Letter 5. The Animals Appear. We have seen that the first signs of life on our earth probably were simple little sea animals and water plants. They could only live in the water, and if they came out and dried up, they must have died as the jellyfish dies today if it gets stranded on the beach and dries up. But in those days, there must have been plenty of water and marshy land, much more so than we have today. Now, those jellyfishes and other sea animals, which had slightly tougher skins, could stay a little longer on dry land than the others, as they did not dry up so soon. So gradually the soft jellyfishes and everything else like them became fewer and fewer as they could not face dry land easily. And those with harder coverings became more and more. This is a very interesting thing to notice. It means that the animals slowly fit themselves or adapt themselves to their surroundings. You have seen in South Kensington Museum in London how birds and animals in winter and in cold countries where there is a lot of ice become white like snow. In tropical countries where there is a lot of green vegetation and trees, they became green or some other bright color. That is, they adapt themselves to their surroundings. They change their color to protect themselves from their enemies, as they cannot easily be seen if they are the same color as their surroundings. They grow far in cold countries to keep warm in the cold. So also the tiger is yellow and striped. It is like sunlight coming through the trees in the jungle. It is difficult to see the tiger in the thick jungle. This very interesting fact that animals try to fit in with their surroundings is a very important thing. Of course, animals do not themselves try to change, but those which change and therefore fit in with their surroundings have a better chance of living. So they increase in numbers and the others do not. This explains so many things. It explains the simple animals slowly developing into their higher kinds of animals, and maybe in millions of years developing into man. We cannot see the changes going on around us as they are slow and our lives are short. But nature goes on working and changing and making more perfect. It never stops or takes rest. Now you remember that the world was getting cooler and was slowly drying up. As it became cooler, the climate changed and many other things changed. As the earth changed, so also slowly the animals changed and newer types of animals appeared. At first, we have only simple sea animals, then complicated sea animals. Later, as dry land increased, there came animals which lived both in water and on land, something like the crocodiles today or the frogs. These were followed by animals which lived entirely on land, and then there came birds which could fly in the air. I have mentioned the frog. This is an interesting study as in its own life it shows us in a way how animals gradually changed from water animals to land animals. A frog at first is a fish, but later it becomes like a land animal and breathes with its lungs as all land animals do. There were great forests in those early days when life started on land. The land must have been all swampy with thick jungles on it. These forests later on got covered up, and with the pressure of a great deal of rock and earth, they slowly changed to coal. You know that we get our coal from mines deep down in the earth. The coal mines are really old forests of those far off days. Among the first land animals were enormous snakes and lizards and crocodiles. Some of these were 100 feet long. Imagine a snake or a lizard 100 feet long. Do you remember seeing the fossils of these brutes in the museum in London? Later came animals which are more like the animals we see today. These are called mammals because they suckle their young. These also were at first much bigger than they are today. The mammal which most resembles man is the monkey, or rather the ape. People think, therefore, that man is descended from the ape. This means that as each animal gradually adapted himself to his surroundings and became better and better, so also man at first was only a better ape. Of course, he went on improving, or nature went on improving him. And now man thinks no end of himself. He imagines himself so utterly different from the animals. But it is good to remember that we are cousins of the ape and the monkey, and even now, many of us, I am afraid, behave like the monkeys do. Letter 6. The Coming of Man. We saw in our last letter how life came to the earth in very simple forms and slowly through millions of years evolved and became what it is today. We also noticed one very interesting and important rule in this evolution of life. Animals are always trying to adapt themselves to their surroundings. In trying to do this, they have developed many new qualities and have become higher, more complicated animals. We can see this change of progress in many ways. For instance, first of all, there were animals without bones, but as these could not survive for long, they developed bones. The first bone they developed was the backbone. So, we have a division of animals, the boneless ones and those with bones. Man and the animals you see about you have, of course, bones. Then again, you find the simple animals like fishes laying eggs and leaving them. They lay thousands of eggs at a time but do not look after them. The mother does not care for her children at all. She simply leaves the eggs and never comes back to them. As there is no one to look after them, most of these eggs die and only a few of them develop into fishes. Is this not terrible waste? As we go up and examine the higher animals, we find that their eggs or children are fewer, but they look after them better. The hen also lays eggs, but she sits upon them and so hatches them. And when the little chicks come out, she feeds them for some time. When they grow up, the mother does not care much for them. There comes a great change in the higher animals, the mammals, about whom I said something in my last letter. These animals do not lay eggs, but the mother keeps the egg inside her and gives birth to the fully developed baby animal, like dogs or cats or rabbits. And afterwards, the mother suckles or gives milk to her young. The mother thus looks after her babies a great deal. Even here, however, you find that there is great deal of waste. The mother rabbit gives birth to a large number of baby rabbits, very few months, and many of these die. But a higher animal like the elephant only gives birth to one baby elephant and looks after the baby well. So you will see that as animals develop, they do not lay eggs, but bear developed young ones like themselves, only smaller, and the higher animals usually give birth to one baby at a time. You will also notice that the higher animals have some affection for their young ones. Man is the highest animal, and so you find that the mother and the father love and take care of their children a great deal. In this way, man must have first developed from the lower animals. Probably the first men were hardly men like we know them today. They must have been half apes, half men, living rather like monkeys. Do you remember going with us to see a professor in Heidelberg in Germany? He showed us a little museum full of fossils and especially an old skull which he kept carefully locked up in a safe. The skull was supposed to belong to one of these earliest men. We now call him the Heidelberg man, simply because the skull was found buried near Heidelberg. Of course, there was no Heidelberg or any other city in those days. In those early days, when the first men wandered about, it used to be very cold. It is called the Ice Age because there was so much ice. Glaciers, such as now exist near the North Pole, came right down to England and Germany. The men must have found it very difficult to leave, and they must have had a hard time. They would only leave where there were no glaciers. We are told by scientists that at that time the Mediterranean was not a sea at all, but one or two lakes. There was no Red Sea either. It was all land. Probably the greater part of India was an island, and the sea existed in the Punjab and part of our provinces. Imagine all South India and Central India as one big island cut off from the Himalayas by the sea. You would then have to go to Missouri, partly by a steamer. Man, when he first came, must have been surrounded by many huge animals, and he must have lived in fear of them. Today, man is master of the world, and he makes the animals do what he likes. Some he tames, like the horse, the cow, the elephant, the dog, the cat, and so many others. Some he eats, and some, like the lions and the tiger, he shoots for pleasure. But in those days, he was not the master, but a poor, hunted creature himself, trying to keep away from the great beasts. Gradually, however, man raised himself and became more and more powerful till he became stronger than any animal. How did he do this? Not by physical strength, for the elephant is much stronger than he is. It was by intelligence and brain power. We can trace this growth of intelligence from the earlier days of man to the present day. Indeed, it is intelligence that separates man from the other animals. There is practically no difference between a man without any intelligence and an animal. The first great discovery that man probably made was that of fire. We light a fire now by a match, but of course, matches are quite recent things. In olden times, fires were made by rubbing two flints against each other till a spark came, and this spark set fire to a piece of dry straw or some other dry thing. Fires sometimes occur by themselves in the forests, perhaps by the rubbing together of flints of something else. The animals were not clever enough to learn anything from this, but man was clever. He saw the use of fire. It kept him warm in the winter and frightened away his enemies, the big animals. So, whenever a fire started, the men and the women must have tried to keep it up by throwing dry leaves into it. They did not want it to go out. Slowly, they must have found out that they themselves could produce a spark and a fire by rubbing flints together. This was a great discovery for them, and it gave them some power over the other animals. Man was then well on his way to the lordship of the world.
Hello, friends. You are listening to Letters from a Father to His Daughter by Jawaharlal Nehru. Please tune in to Chhuti Presents Escape into Audio Stories for other episodes. Till then, goodbye and stay in touch.